Okay, great. David Kirsten here for Quantum Leap Live, and uh, I'm excited to have a special guest, Keith Uriarte, with us today. And first, I did want to introduce or have Cory, my co-host, introduce himself and tell him what he does for people who may not know Cory, and then we're gonna do a quick check-in, and then we're gonna get right to Keith. Hey,
Hey
Cory, how
everyone.
are you?
I'm doing good. Hey David. Cory Nott here, and I am a business coach with Take Wing Coaching, and here to support David on his podcast. And I think we may have just lost Keith. Oh,
Oh,
he just went blank. Okay.
yeah, that's a setting on Zoom.
Right.
Do you have any? I know you've been kind of getting over your injuries. Do you have any quick business check-in for this week, or did you want to pass on that?
Well, we're about to launch our lead magnet, which will be a set of sales forms and sort of a short sales ebook. So we're excited about that. Gail's been mostly handling that, but it kind of comes out of the work that we've done together in a way for people to find us.
Okay, great. Yeah, I forgot to do my book recommendation. I did have this little book thing in my Andrew Carnegie book laying over there that is kind of an interesting anecdote I shared about which I won't go into, but I would recommend studying him. But he had kind of a timely issue on labor policy. I feel like labor is a big thing out there in the news right now. A lot of kind of you know challenging things, people being let go, and I think it's interesting if you study Andrew Carnegie. He kind of came up in that industrial age, and then the strikes got very heated and almost at the turn of the 20th century, and he kind of mishandled some of that stuff after having a great union person for a long time. He really believed that you really, if you treat people well and you pay them higher, you get better results, and he did that for a while. But then he lost that guy, actually got blown up in a furnace, and then he kind of strayed on that policy, and that he actually never recovered from that. So I thought that was an interesting anecdote. But look, we'll avoid getting too far off into labor policy, although I love talking about it, and I know Keith and I are actually going to talk more about some of this stuff too. But with that, let's get right to Keith. If you don't mind, Keith, introducing yourself. You are welcome to comment on any of the labor stuff that we're seeing out there right now, but I do want to focus mostly on Rotary and some other things.
That is a good segue. And David, thank you. And Cory, thank you for having me. So Keith Uriarte, and I spent 40 years in the labor movement, speaking of labor unions. I was organizing director for ASME in California, which put me in a lot of different situations. Often, it was trying to resolve problems and before they happened, before an issue happened. Sometimes it wouldn't work, but always trying to do the best. And despite what people say, there is one thing that first of all, most contracts are settled. But anyway, when someone is out there, let's say on strike, there is only one thing that is a focus, and that is to get people back to work. And so over the years, I handled many of those situations, negotiated countless labor contracts, many of them the first labor contract, which is the most difficult. And involved in organizing campaigns and political campaigns, ran many, and have been able to, I think, identify issues, which is really important. But you're right. I mean, with regards to the current situation that we're in, we're finding out that people were not staying home because they were getting unemployment checks. It was a whole other transition that was taking place, and as you said, we could talk some of that later. But that's my background, and I I just love people, and I think that's the thing that keeps driving me as an individual, is helping other people.
Great. And, you know, I do love mentioning your labor background, because I know people are earlier in their career. I just see how great of experience that is for dealing with people and building communities, that there's really no better experience than working for the labor unions and all the campaigns that they do, because that campaign experience is essentially what you're doing on specific issues. Or say it's a nonprofit, you're essentially running a campaign for that nonprofit to achieve a public good. And, you know, each of these labor campaigns, that's what the same thing you do for those campaigns. So I just think that's where all the professional organizers are in the labor movements.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, to me, I try to focus on the things that we have in common, meaning different sides. It's easy to identify the differences, but bringing people together around common issues is critical, and often that is what, you know, we lose sight of.
Yeah, no, I really see that with you now that you're such a central figure in the Oakland community in terms of bringing people together, because you know people on all sides, and you know people really like knowing and working with you, myself included. And I think a big piece of that is Rotary, where we actually met, and
Yeah.
you know we're working on the membership and recruitment issue together. We were tapped by Dudley, our president Dudley, who's been great to work on getting more members, keeping the members we have, and keeping people engaged. And we actually joined the club around the same time, so we've been a little bit on the same learning curve. I just wanted to see if you could just tell us a little bit about why you joined Rotary and kind of what your experience has been in Rotary.
Well, I mean, one, it's pretty much of what we were just talking about, bringing people together. And I was a member of Rotary 30 years ago. And the sponsor was someone from management. And she was the deputy superintendent of a high school district. And when I was retiring for the last time, I retired 3 times. But in planning that retirement, I wanted to continue to be involved in the community. Oakland, I love Oakland. You know, it's just so cool. But also broaden my base. You know, as I say, the labor movement and dealing with folks, I wanted to experience something different. And Rotary came back my mind. You know, it service above self. I mean, you know, you think about that, and what does that mean? You know, it's giving back, and that is what Rotary is about. But also, with Oakland Rotary, I discovered, because I went to I was invited to go to a mixer. It was a noontime mixer at City Hall. And the diversity caught my attention immediately, the diversity of the members of Rotary. And then looking at the organizations that are involved, not just the people, but the organizations that are involved in Oakland Rotary. You know, it's all over, any mystery or idea what people may have of, you know, a Rotary Club, you know, it's very different. It is about people who, you know, who care, and, you know, wanted to be part of that.
Great. Cory, I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Hey, Keith. So what are your goals in Rotary?
I want to help Oakland Rotary build upon the base that it has, expand, that, I mean, it's, very similar to my experience of wanting to, to broaden my base of people that we know. Bringing more people into Rotary that may never have thought about being part of Oakland Rotary, and what is it about? That's the stuff that is exciting, and we're seeing that happen. 2 weeks ago, we had on stage the induction of 4 people, and I was sponsoring 2 of them, and I turned and I looked and I went, here is this mosaic of Oakland, and here they were, on the stage and becoming part of this organization, and different walks of life, but what do they have in common? Each one gives back, and each one wants to give back more in a different way. I mean, that's exciting. So that was exciting to me.
So speaking of attracting people and I guess retention too, but why would you say it's an exciting time to be in Rotary?
Well, I don't know if an exciting time. I think that the times that we're in, or the time that we're in, can be defined as challenging. But I see, this time that we're in as opportunity. Opportunity, what we're just talking about, bringing people together. There are the needs that are out there, but yet they can seem overwhelming. Those needs didn't cause overnight. I mean, it took a long time. Is any one individual going to be able to solve those? No, but as we're coming together, we can do that, and I think we are. As I mean, it's amazing, what this organization does and its involvement in Oakland and worldwide. Last week at our meeting, we're talking about the work in Central and South America, in Africa, polio. It was amazed. There are, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 2 cases left in the world right now. But part of the discussion was, the revolution that took place in Afghanistan, how the Taliban has agreed to allow for people to continue the vaccination for polio. So, with all those challenges, there are opportunities, and I think that's what we need to focus in on.
Great. I did have a little bonus question for people who maybe aren't from Oakland, who don't know the story behind those, the cranes. I'm talking about that picture behind you there. If you don't mind just telling us, about that and the origin of those. I love that little piece of artwork that you have.
Well, so unfortunately, this is not my wife. My wife is an artist. She submitted a painting different than this. This is a photograph, but she submitted a painting for our, the Rotary endowment. We have a yearly event the gala, and one of our members bought the cranes. I mean, that's it's an interesting sight to see. Of course, this one here is was it part of what the creation of Star Wars and the idea behind some of the figures, but yeah, I mean, Oakland. The history is so cool. The art, it is amazing. The art, not just the visual arts, but music and other types of art. I mean, with all the challenges, it thrives. And it's amazing walking down the street. You know, during the pandemic, all of the murals that were painted, you know, that were used, there was the plywood on the storefronts. You know, it's amazing how, you know, the community came together over that.
Yeah, and I was just, what I heard was that George Lucas actually came up with those ideas for those walking things from the Empire Strikes Back that walk across the snow, from the cranes, you know, and but most people in the Bay Area know that, but I think outside, unless you live in Oakland or the East Bay, you probably don't know that that's where George Lucas, that he created Star Wars while he was here, and Lucasfilms is actually still based here in large part, which was sold out to Disney, and we have Pixar. So there is a huge kind of design community, but also that kind of that creation of Star Wars is pretty amazing how he came up with those, one of the most memorable design things from Star Wars, and that scene, of course. So and you were tying Star Wars and the art to really Rotary, which we really have a focus on art as well in Oakland, and as part of our club and Rotary. If you don't mind, just
we just brought a corporate sponsor just joined. It's the Oakland Interfaith Gospel Choir, and one of their reasons, they're talking about arts. I mean, in the Oakland schools and schools throughout the country, in California, but Oakland in particular, you know, the budget cuts, and those are some of the things that, you know, that get cut first. And you know, children, our future, you know, the creativity gets stymied, and what they want to do, and the hookup has already occurred. We had a business development meeting, and the hookup already occurred of working together with a couple of nonprofits to reach out to, through an organization or a committee in Oakland Rotary called Hope, and they work with high school kids that have been, that we'll say at risk of not completing high school, and to help them get into the arts and to be able to expand their creativity. And it also stimulates the mind for, you know, academically. So I mean, that's the stuff that happens regularly, you know.
Great. And I know that you know, and just seeing you being active in Rotary, and I know it's kind of a minority of members that are as active as you are, and maybe you're probably even more active than I am, or of course President Dudley, but you guys are really make our club function at such a high level. Your involvement, I know it's a lot of time and commitment, which you actually can give, because you said this is your third retirement, but I know there's kind of a subset, like the average age of Rotary is about 56 or 57 in our club, for latest numbers I heard, and you have a subset of kind of younger members joining for business, and then you have a lot of people who join when they retired. If you don't mind just talking about maybe why, as a business owner, you might look at Rotary, but also if you're retired, why you might look at Rotary, if you could speak to that.
Or even younger. And why would anyone? I mean, one, obviously, you know, there are connections that are out there. You know, there's almost 300 members in Oakland Rotary, and you know, and from all different walks of life. I mean, we had an example. I had a guest 2 months ago, and behind me was another Rotarian who had some guests. After the meeting, they started talking with my guest and the other guest and this other Rotarian, and they started talking about what they had in common. They didn't realize what they had in common. They're now creating a nonprofit to actually work with and set up apprenticeships for the formerly incarcerated. It's just, so why would someone join? You know, it's not just the self-interest. It is that to a degree, but giving back to the community. It's all interrelated. Why would someone, retire? People spend, some of this stuff is in their heart and soul. And if it's there, this is an organization for them to be able to continue, to give back.
Great. Yeah, I know how you mentioned the international aspect of it as well, that some people who've been in Rotary for a while, they actually help, travel overseas and work on projects, or you can contribute and help build your own project that functions internationally. So it's really no limit to what you can do in Rotary. And, it all really starts at the local level. I think most of what we do is local. I think by percentage, at least over half of what we do, and then, maybe 30% goes internationally. But Cory, did you have any reaction or any kind of testimonial for?
Well, I'd be curious also to know, like, why say Oakland #3 versus others. I think there's definitely a difference. I've been to many different Rotary groups and presented to a few over the years, and maybe you could just say something to that. I don't know how much experience you have outside of the Oakland #3, but thoughts on that?
Years ago, I had the book. There used to be a book, and my travels, I spent at least 2 days a week on a plane. So I was able to wander and go to different Rotaries, and part of my work right now here in Oakland is I work with 4 other Rotaries in the immediate area. Everyone is unique, and I think that's one of the things that are special. Oakland Rotary deals with its uniquenesses in committees, and so that makes that very unique. And I think both former past President Seth Butner and current President Dudley will say that if please get involved in the committee. If you don't know, or if one doesn't exist that interests you, create one. That's important. And many of the committees started that way. The Business Development Committee started that way. And so that's encouraged. And we have almost 300 members, which not all. I think the average Rotary Club has around 30, 25 to 30 members. So that's very different.
Yeah, I think the best explanation is to really just come visit. And there's a certain magic in Oakland Rotary #3 because of our size and diversity of background. And, we meet every Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Except for the first time of the month. I don't know. They met in person the first Thursday this month, which I couldn't make, but come check it out. And, me or Keith can greet you and tell you more about it. I know Keith knows a lot of the folks in the club, and he's sponsored a lot of people as well. So, and then when we have these new people coming in, we meet them, more people come in. So you build such a connection in the community that's so exciting in a club of our size.
Absolutely.
Well, good. Well, we are just about at time. I was going to just see if Cory might be able to just share his thoughts on, I know I actually I was sponsored into the club by Cory, he lives in Marin, so it's not as good for his commute, but I actually joined at Cory's advice because he encourages, business owners to be a part of 2 extra groups. I don't know if you have any thoughts about, from a business development perspective, Cory, why you recommended that I join, and it ended up being one of the best decisions of my life. Kind of why I joined and why I stay is a little bit different, but it's
well, that's always hit or miss. I joined because I was planning to be more and more involved in Oakland, and we were living there at the time. Things radically changed for me that just right after joining. But well, as far as David goes, I know that he was looking for something also to, invest himself in, and he does that. He's done that in the business group as well, and our BNI group, and in the BNI organization as a director. And it just makes sense to do the same thing, with the social organization like Rotary. And it just seemed like I felt like he'd be a great person to bring in. I knew that he would get along well, and I could see when David was starting out that he was trying to break into some different networking groups, like what would make sense for him. And so I snatched him up for Rotary at that time. And yeah, it turned out to be a great decision. And
BNI too. So
of course, really,
I've kind of followed your example, really. So some of this stuff you told me, but I really just saw how you did it, and then I kind of
yeah, and let me speak to that, because I think one thing about Rotary number 3 in Oakland, and there's different places you can go and make decisions. And now I've got to make a decision, like, where do I want to go now? And the one thing I did see and I evaluated, and we've always taught, is that if you're going to be in a network, be a leader in the network, right? And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what the purpose is, because you are networking, you're getting to know people. But if you're going to make it work, bring it to its maximum for yourself and for the people that you're helping, you be a leader. And Rotary number 3, I saw, had a lot of opportunities for leadership, like as you said, within the committees. Right? There's, you can kind of carve out your own thing, or you can join up with other people, but it didn't feel like it had a like a clique or a small group that just controls everything, and you've got to pay your dues year after year after year after year until they finally kind of let you in. Some organizations can be like that, and I imagine there's probably a few Rotary groups like that are something like that. But I've also known some other Rotary groups that were straight up just for professionals, people who have more time than money. And so there are a lot of options out there in the Rotary groups. And so that's what I'm looking for now.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I know we are about at time, but that aspect is probably one of the most powerful things about Rotary. It's something that President Dudley spoke to when he came on, but we do see a lot of emerging leaders in our club in terms of, people maybe led in, for example, Keith's example, led in the labor field, and now he's a leader in Rotary. And we have people like Jesse Schmidt, the chair of business development, and Derek Johnson, on some of the things that he does. So it is really a kind of a training ground for leaders and different aspects. I don't know if you have any closing comments on that, Keith, and we do have to end this podcast and then start our second leg.
Other than there's room for more. And that's what we need to do, is we need to keep working and getting deeper into the community. And I know that President Dudley is supporting that and is actively doing that. And we just need to have more people in the conversation. I'm so to you, and that is, in any conversation you're having with a friend or what have you, the topic of Rotary can come up. It's just getting people to think about that, and problem solving, giving back, connections. Hey, try out Rotary. Come, be a guest, and see what you think.
Perfect. And I did love how you pointed out, Cory, that can happen pretty quickly, because both Keith and I are fairly new. We joined about 2 years ago, give or take, and we already became deeply involved in it and kind of have, become kind of leaders in certain areas that we do and what we do in that club. So I love that aspect about how quickly you can make a difference. Yeah. Is what Keith is saying. Cory said too. So, well, good. Well, we're going to leave it there for today. We are over time, but Keith, thanks so much for coming on to share your story. I look forward to connecting soon and seeing you at Thursday's meeting.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me.